Welcome to the second video, the final video, in our third topic, detecting signs of deception in our series on the investigative interview. This is going to focus on nonverbal signals as opposed to verbal, which is what the last video was about. The head and the arms and the legs, and then aspects of the way that the subject sits. Note, though, that these are going to be somewhat more visceral and attenuated than the verbal signs we saw in our last video. These will probably be more visible when the subject is feeling very stressed or is getting to a place where you're getting close to an uncomfortable place for the subject. This is really starting to get into interrogation. When you start to directly accuse the subject, or you suggest that they're lying, or that something that they said doesn't make any sense, anything that is in that general category should be thought of as interrogation. And that is a separate area of study. I will provide some resources for you at the end of this video about where you can learn more about how to do that. To learn about deception in the interrogation setting, how to interrogate, how to plan it, and so forth. But I would highly recommend that you do that first before you get into any questioning type that does get to a point of accusations or making statements that the person's lying. So you may see these things. I rounded up a bit as you start to ask questions from a general place of inquiry. You may get to a place where this person's very uncomfortable, and you may or may not see some of these nonverbal signs. I just figure that really did warrant a mention here at the outset. The head and the arms are the place where your subject is going to show most nonverbal signs of deception. These are also the easiest to see, which is nice. Also, the format of this video is going to be much more bulleted. So you're going to find most of the slides that follow here are going to be a series of single points, because there's a lot of different individual signs that we need to cover. The head is the easiest part of the body to control, and will be where your subject is going to exhibit and practice most of their deceptive behavior. Note, though, that as before, these could be innocent, taken alone, so remember your baseline and your clusters before considering these individual signs alone. If the head is tilted and relaxed, your subject's probably listening to you. Conversely, if the person's head is straight and kind of rigid, they may be angry with you. If the chin hits the chest, kind of held down, this could be a sign of depression or a resignation that being truthful is a better option than being deceptive. If the subject rests his head in his hands, sort of to support it, with the elbows on the table, this may be a sign the subject is thinking about what you're saying and may be involved in some sort of internal dialogue. If the person forms a pyramid or triangle with their hands, fingers pointed up and the thumbs joined together, either in front of the face or somewhere in the front of their body, obviously, this may be an indication that the person feels superior to you, may feel that they are wasting their time or some such sentiment. The thinker pose, with the elbow on the knee, fist on the forehead, this means that the person is probably faking paying attention to you. The person is probably trying to think around your topic and to continue to try to deceive. Watch for an overly concerned, pleasant look on the subject's face. This is a sign of false interest or a form of disguising concern or fear that they're going through at that time. If the person smiles and uses all of the mouth, this is a good sign that the person is being truthful. If they show only their upper teeth in the smile, this may be a sign that the subject feels control of the situation and does not take you seriously. A partial smile or awkward-looking smile may be a sign that your subject is faking sincerity and interest. This is in an effort to disguise fear or concern. A person who wears glasses may push them up on the nose as the glasses slide down on the bridge of the nose. This may be a subconscious effort to hide the eyes. It can also be because the subject is nervous and they're sweating more, causing the glasses to slide down on the nose. Also, a flushing in the face as the body forces blood to the larger muscles and torso due to the stress response. This is an indication of fear, and a redness in the face is a sign of anger where there's increased blood pressure. Watch for the eyes and lips to become darker. As the person becomes stressed, the oxygen leaves the face, causing this darker color to appear. The person may freeze their face in an effort to hide what they're really feeling. As they consciously do this, though, you might notice what's called behavior leakage in other parts of the body, unconsciously. As they're focusing on the freezing of the face, they are unwittingly and unknowingly exhibiting other signs of deceptive behavior. Again, it's called behavior leakage. Watch for facial twitches, typically a quarter to a half second in duration. This is a sign, definitely, that the person is experiencing stress and a sign of possible deception. The nose is the most sensitive part of the body to stress. During periods of stress, as the blood pressure in the nose increases or drops, the tissue will become irritated, causing the person to itch, stroke, or pick at it. In fact, watch for touching of this entire area, the nose, the mouth, and the chin. Deceptive people touch this area more often than truthful people. Yawning may be because the subject needs more oxygen due to stress. However, be sure that this isn't because your subject isn't actually tired or bored with your interview. Keep also in mind the time of day or night and the duration of your interview. These are all things that can cause a need for oxygen. The untruthful will also breathe more rapidly, more than, let's say, 18 to 22 times per minute. Not that you're counting. The upper chest will become more tense, and the subject's inhaling and exhaling as such is not full. The breathing is shallow and not smooth, causing the subject to gasp and sigh occasionally. Hiding of the mouth may be a subconscious attempt to stop the mouth from what it is saying, due to shame perhaps. It could be that a hand or a finger is over the mouth, putting pens or eyeglasses to the lips, or biting nails. These are all signs of potential signs of deception. A biting or pursing of the lips could be a sign of deception. Dry mouth. I have noticed in virtually every interview where the subject is feeling very stressed based on your questions. Again, not interrogation at this point, although this will potentially show itself in the interrogation phase. But again, we're not covering that. The stress causes the mouth, I've mentioned this before, to produce less saliva. In the subject, when they talk, they sort of a tacky clicking sound. The person will try to wet their lips and swallow more often to account for the dryness, and may ask for water more often. The person may also, the untruthful, that is, will roll their head more often. This is an effort to stretch tense neck muscles. The movements will typically be quick and jerky. The head may tilt face down, which is a showing of a possible submissive attitude. If the subject's head is tilted back, this can be a sign of arrogance, sort of an attempt to elevate themselves above the topic that you are inquiring about. Eye contact for the average person is typically 40 to 60% of the time. Too much or too little eye contact can be a sign of deception. This can be a little tricky to interpret, though. It doesn't necessarily mean a sign of deception. Cultural and other social norms may cause a subject to look at you more or less than you would expect. This is especially true, of course, of introverted people. As always, establish a baseline and watch for eye contact during relaxed and inconsequential parts of your interview. Too much eye contact, though, can be an attempt to appear truthful or interested. The subject may also be looking at you more intently to see how you're reacting to their behavior. Some will try to avoid your attempts to see their behavior by not showing their eyes, by looking at other things, such as their nails or their hand. They may cover their face with their hand to hide their eyes, or close their eyes, or nonchalantly look at anything but you. Watch for eye blinking as compared to baseline. This is a sign of how fast or slow they may be thinking. Also, watch for eyelids that stay closed for longer than usual. This may be a sign of stress, as they do not want to look at you. If the subject is blinking less often than baseline, this can be a sign that they're having some sort of intense internal dialogue, perhaps whether to stop being deceptive. However, blinking less often just may be that the person's more interested in what you're talking about. When people are nervous, they squint, they glance up, and stare more than usual. Certain muscles in the face are only controlled by the involuntary parts of the nervous system, and only when emotion is felt and not faked. That's why it's so difficult to create a smile that appears sincere. Know though that certain people, like career criminals and actors, are capable of producing an emotion within themselves at will. This subject may use an emotion felt in another way to appear as they wish to. For example, to appear to cry for the victim when they were really crying about the fact that they may be close to being caught, for example, or some other situation where they felt the emotion and can now actually experience it as they would in your situation. In addition to smiles, look for quick, surprise-sounding laughs or inappropriate smirks. These are a sign of a person that is insincere and is being deceiving. Last, the carotid artery. This is another one of my favorites as far as telling whether or not somebody is being deceptive. This is a case where you see the Adam's apple, for example, will shake. You'll see the sides of the neck pulse right around the point of the artery. This is a person who's definitely experiencing a high degree of stress, and one of the ones that I found, like dry mouth, to be very common. Moving now to the arms, the place where you're second most likely to see deceptive signs, nonverbal deceptive signs, because this is the second easiest place for your subject to do this. It's also rather easy to see compared to other parts of the body. Also note that the signs here are going to be more simple, and the reasons for them are also going to be straightforward compared to the head. So, for example, a shrug of the shoulders may be a sign of denial to what you're saying. Dropping or hunching of the shoulders is an indication of depression or an acceptance of the direction of the topic that you're inquiring into. Pulling the shoulders back while tightening the neck can be a sign of anger, but remember again, baseline and negative clusters. When a subject is stressed or threatened, this person will subconsciously try to protect vital areas. The elbows may pull in to cover the torso or the groin, but otherwise, the subject that's relaxed doesn't feel threatened, and the elbows will hang loose to the side of the body. In fact, the movement of any part of the body to protect the abdominal area can be a sign of protective behavior, such as crossing the legs or hunching the legs up close to the chest. If the subject hunches over and hugs himself or herself, this can be a sign of self-reassurance as this person experiences loss or depression or stress. Sometimes gestures can be considered a nervous response. However, certain cultures use many hand gestures to accent words, and those who are not necessarily very good with verbal skills may use their hands more to help them communicate. Also watch for the frequency of hand movements, grooming, finger tapping, etc., that are more pronounced than baseline could be a sign of increased stress level and signs of deception. Watch for a rubbing, touching, or itching by the hands. Excessive touching or rubbing of the ears, for example, is a good sign of an increased stress level, while rubbing or massaging the back of the neck may be a sign of agitation. If the subject rubs or massages their hands, this might mean that that person is trying to comfort themselves. Rubbing the point of the chin with the dominant hand is a sign of acquiescence, and that the subject may be choosing to now become more truthful in their responses. Note, as the blood in the body is diverted to the blood vessels in the skin, this will cause the blood pressure in these areas to increase. This can create an itchy sensation, as this irritates nerves located in the skin. This is especially true in the upper trunk, nose, and arms. So again, you might see the hands, part of the arms, doing this. If the subject sits with their hands open, palms up, and arms extended, this can mean that the subject is opening up, starting to relax and become less nervous about the topic, and maybe moving to a more truthful state. If your subject is nervous about talking to you at all, an initial handshake may be cold, clammy, or sweaty. This is a result of what the body goes through, as you mentioned earlier, and this may be a sign of stress as well. Oftentimes, a person may choose to relive an event by gesturing with their hands and arms. Watch that carefully, as something may leak out as they say, recreate an assault. If they are the one who suspected, they may act it out, and while they're reliving it, they might actually indicate, let's say, how they may have struck the person or how they may have actually behaved during the event. Nervous outlets like picking at lint or grooming, of course, are signs of stress, and we've seen this in different form earlier. The truthful person has fine motor coordination. The person can gesture and write smoothly and natural. The untruthful person will have an illegible or spiky handwriting, and his hands will be sweaty and clammy, further impacting writing. So look for this if you are getting a written statement or some other written exemplars. Watch for this. The untruthful person's gestures are jerky because of tense muscles. Gestures will appear unnatural and are timed inappropriately, either too soon or too late, especially compared to baseline. The subject may be using his hands to keep from having to look at you. For example, he'll rub his nose and in the process also shield the eyes from your view. Again, we've seen this similarly in the area when we talked about the head and so forth. If your subject props up the head with the hands, this could be a sign of disinterest. Here the body may slump because the body is tired and the person now needs to support their head. We did touch on this same issue in the nonverbal signs of deception when we discussed the head. If a person crosses their arms and clenches their fist under the arms, this person is probably angry. If in the same posture, this person grabs their arms, this may be a sign that the subject is in a stubborn frame of mind. We now move to our final two areas. These two areas are the places where the subject spends the least amount of attention on deception in places that are harder for you to view. If there's a table, for example. And as usual, it goes without saying that you do need to consider these and everything else with regard to the person's baseline and to negative clusters of 5 or more. That's very important. The legs and the feet are at the extreme end of the body, and because of this, we pay the least amount of attention to controlling them. So some things you'll see here, very similar to the arms, very much more simple and straightforward than we saw with the head. You might see a wiggling or shaking or bouncing of the feet, especially if the foot is up off the floor, perhaps on the person's knee. If the subject slides his feet under the chair, this is a sign of stress, especially if the subject crosses his legs while doing this. Any extraneous movement in the legs may be a sign of increased stress. If the subject turns and crosses their legs so that they're facing away from you, this is a sign that this person is not accepting of you in some way. If the legs are open and facing you, the subject is probably comfortable with you. If the subject puts a leg out in front of them, this may be a sign that a way of keeping and maintaining a distance between the two of you. Interestingly, though, if this person points a leg toward the door, this may be a nonverbal signal telling you that he's ready to run out the door. And I've seen this before. A wiggling or shaking of the knees is a sign of agitation and increased stress. If the toes, while the feet are flat on the floor, point inward, this may be someone who's introverted. But again, think of baseline. If the toes are pointed outward, the person may feel comfortable with you or even superior to you. If the person crosses their legs higher up at the knees, this is more of a defensive posture and sort of a way of protecting the abdominal region. This is opposed to a person who crosses their legs at the ankle. That's more of a relaxed state. Sitting position like legs is another thing that people don't usually pay a lot of attention to as far as how they control their behavior. But there's some very interesting behaviors that you will note here. So for example, if the subject is sitting as though they're ready to run, leaning to one side with their feet under the weight of their body, this person is telling you that they're under extreme stress and really wants to leave. This person may be facing a door in a direction away from you. Some subjects may try to appear macho or overtly bored by sitting in the chair slouched back with the legs kicked out and the hands draped over the side of the chair or their hands tucked in the pants. This is again another sign of discomfort and of detachment from the situation. A subject may try to distance themselves from you by turning the chair around and sitting in it backwards. This places more of a barrier between the two of you. When an untruthful person sits in the chair, they often move it first, whereas the truthful person sits in it without thought or just moves it a little bit for comfort. The untruthful person moves it because that person can angle it so that the person does not have to face you and so that the person can be farther away from you. This person may also sit in the chair sideways, also to keep from having to face you. Both of these maneuvers can be an effort to hide and protect the abdominal area. This is an unconscious reaction relating to protection from vulnerability. The abdominal area has no bones protecting it, such as the upper body and chest do. The subject may freeze their body into one position for long periods of time. A relaxed person will move at least occasionally. Clenched fists, a rigid posture, crossing of the legs to keep them from wiggling, and sitting on their hands are all signs of this. This is similar to the frozen face that we discussed earlier when we were talking about the head and other parts of the body. This is an effort to hide tensions, agitation, and stress. As we round out our final topic on signs of nonverbal deception, it bears mention that negative clusters are very important. So what you want to do is think about the verbal signals we saw in our first video, and then the nonverbal signs of deception from the head, the arms, the legs, and the way the person sits should all be taken together. Any 5 from any single one of those categories or more should be used as a way of gauging a person's deception, because no one single sign by itself should be relied upon as a determination of deception or not. And lastly, before we leave this topic, you want to consider your impact on the subject. Your mannerisms can affect how your subject responds. You want to be as constructive as possible. Are your postures rigid or lazy? Are your gestures short and quick? Are your legs crossed, arms folded, showing disinterest or lack of respect? Your behavior may be sending messages to your subject that you are not a professional, and that you may have an alternative agenda or are not sincere. This damages rapport and the quality and quantity of information that you get from the subject. Before concluding, I did promise you that I would point in the direction of some resources where you can learn more about how to become proficient at interrogation and learn more about detecting deception in the context of interrogation. One is Wicklander-Zulawski. Rather than spell that out for you, I would just tell you to go to the website at www.w-z.com. They're the program that I learned on, and they're fantastic. This was something I took I think it was half-week-long courses back in the early 90s, which kind of dates me. The next group that you can look into is the REID technique, a little easier to spell, R-E-I-D. You can find them at reid.com. I think that website's probably worth, that URL's worth some money now. But they are also very respected and have been around for a very long time, so that would be another place to look. There is what's called the PEACE method, P-E-A-C-E, just like the word peace, which stands roughly for preparation and planning, engage, explain, account, closure, and evaluate. Again, that's roughly supposed to spell peace. If you Google that, you will find out more about it. There's also a gentleman by the name of Joe Navarro, N-A-V-A-R-R-O. He's a former FBI agent, and his interrogation techniques, his take on it is quite fun and interesting. He has sort of his own take, but I found it to be very interesting and helpful. Otherwise, that does it for our series, our 3 topics, our introduction to investigative interviewing, the interview itself, and detecting deception. So I hope you've enjoyed it. If you need more information about me, you can go to investigativeinterviewing.com, spelled just like you see it on the page here. And I look forward to hearing from you, actually. Go and submit some comments. There's a place where you can contact me or us directly. Tell us what you want to see, ways we can improve, and so forth. So thank you. I hope you enjoyed it, and I wish you the best of luck with your developing your skills in investigative interviewing.